Welcome to the Peaceful Worldschooling Podcast, featuring your host, Angela Harders. We are committed to cultivating a peaceful world beginning right in our own hearts and homes. Together, we believe that the world is our biggest and best classroom, and the people and places in it are our greatest teachers. So I invite you to join me on the adventure of a lifetime, beginning with a conversation that can change the world. Today's episode of the Peaceful Worldschooling Podcast is brought to you by the De-Schooling Diary, a 365-day journey into living and learning without school. You can order your copy today on Amazon. Hello, and thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Peaceful Worldschooling Podcast. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce to you to parenting coach and podcaster, Danielle Bettmann. Danielle, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you to all of my listeners for joining us as we have a conversation that can change the world.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. I have been looking forward to this one for a while now. Danielle, to get us started, can you just share a little bit more about who you are, your family, and a little about your story?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, like you said, my name's Danielle Bettmann. I have been married to my high school sweetheart for 11 years. We've been together almost 20 now, which is insane. I have two daughters. They are 9 and 7 right now, and we live in Omaha, Nebraska. And I started my business Wholeheartedly 3 years ago. And before that, my background was teaching. I have a teaching certification from birth through third grade. And I was a lead teacher in Head Start and early Head Start. And then I moved into a home visiting program for Save the Children called Early Steps to School Success, because I realized what happens in a classroom is great, but what's happening at home is what really wires kids. And that's what matters the most. And parents are doing their best, but there is no training, no orientation period, no manual, no village, no guarantees, all the things. So we're doing our darndest, and it is a really, really hard job. So then, especially when I had my two daughters, it was like, okay, I can't believe parents even listen to a word I had to say as a teacher, because I knew nothing. I knew nothing until I had my own daughters, especially my second daughter, but because she is my tough one. She is the sweet and spicy, 0 to 60 emotions, stubborn as all get out. You cannot change her mind. And so she has really taught me all I know in how to help strong-willed kids. And that's kind of like where my business has taken a journey. So I started off 3 years ago doing in-home sessions with families to just work on improving their child's behavior. And it's really grown from the point of the pandemic, where I started my podcast. It's called Failing Motherhood. And I started working with families one-on-one virtually through a program called Sanity and Solutions. And then I started a group program as well called Wholeheartedly Calm. And I work with parents that have strong-willed kids from age 1 to 7, and I help them extend their patience, which is a big one, get on the same page by writing a family business plan, and improve their child's behavior by reducing the power struggles and all of the meltdowns and tantrums and big emotions. And I love my job, and I'm so glad I get to do it every day.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. And I love the fact that you have a background in teaching too. Like you, I was also a teacher before I became a mom. And I feel like being a teacher prepared me to be a mom in a lot of ways. But you're absolutely right. Nothing can fully prepare you for motherhood besides being a mother and dealing with like the nitty gritty of that. And it always has amazed me too, the fact that we spent all this time in training to be a teacher. And it's like, I only have these kids for a very, very short period of time. And yet when I became a mom, I was hit with that reality of like, oh my gosh, I put in all this training to be a teacher. And then now I'm a mom, and what training, like what training is there? Like, how do you prepare? How do you what class can I take? Like, how do I figure this out? And it is really challenging, especially when there's so many different views about what it looks like to be a good parent and what it means to be a good mom, and all these like conflicting voices all over the place. And it really is hard to figure out what kind of a mom do I really want to be, for me and for my family and for my children?
So
And
hard.
so I'm wondering, how did you figure that out for yourself? Like, how did you figure out the kind of mom that you wanted to be and to know that gentle parenting was kind of the way for you to go? Because I know
Hmm.
gentle parenting is not the way that most of us were raised. So I don't know if
Right.
you grew up in a gentle parenting environment or if you learned it, but I would love to hear about how you discovered gentle parenting and knew that that was the way that you wanted to pursue motherhood.
Yeah, such a great question. Definitely didn't grow up with gentle parenting as the way that I was parented or my instincts right off the bat, and neither did my husband. I don't know a lot of people that that's true of in this generation. That's why, again, it's really hard to shift that dynamic. But for me, when I had my daughters, I wasn't following any of the Instagram parenting accounts. I didn't even know they existed. I was still very new to Instagram and was like only posting like a really, really filtered picture of flowers. So for me, I had not come across almost any of the labels of respectful parenting, conscious parenting, gentle parenting, any of it. And really still hadn't when I started my company. All I knew was that I wanted to be able to advise and speak life into parents who just were so consumed with worrying about if they were screwing up their kids, and knew that my background in my bachelor's, my child development degree, gave me an understanding of what's going on in my child's head. And based on that, I knew how to treat them respectfully. I knew how to take developmentally appropriate expectations into account. And I brought in a little bit of that classroom management to be able to help me be playful, in the moments that I need some of that behavior. And so when I started my company, I didn't want to get certified in any particular methodology until I knew it was the absolute right one that kind of like checked every box for me. And so I kept pursuing and figuring out all the options. And I'm still to this day blown away by how many different things are out there. And that's why it is so overwhelming. It's absolutely so like feels like everything conflicts and none of it makes sense, especially when every child is different.
Yeah.
So I finally found a year ago now, I found positive discipline. And that was what I eventually got certified in as a parent educator. And for me, it just finally put even more of a structure and framework behind what I was already doing and recommending. And it really just helped me understand how I can even better explain it to parents with all of the big picture background knowledge that they need to feel really confident that they're doing the right thing at the right time. And it's so much more of just like a foundation than it is, that there's an exact right and wrong for every single moment of discipline.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That is so true. So you kind of knew intuitively, I guess, that you wanted to parent with like gentleness and respect and things
Hmm.
like that without knowing any of the labels beforehand.
Right. Because I was in classrooms and I was doing the work for my degree, and it was so obvious that timeouts and punishments and rewards were just not effective. They did not actually meet the child where they are or teach the skills that they need. And so I knew right off the bat that's not for me because it's just not effective. So so I knew originally that I was always going to take a different path just based on what I used in my classrooms because it looks totally different from a teaching
Yeah.
lens.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that punishments and timeouts and things like that are not effective because I guess it's better to ask in what way are they effective? Because of course they
Yeah.
work for something. Otherwise people just wouldn't do it at all. But I think
Anything works in the short term.
exactly. And I think that's
Mhm.
that's where we really start
Mhm.
thinking and processing, is this timeout going to work in the sense of, is my child going to sit there and maybe like show some minimal compliance and do what I want them to do for this moment? Um, but is it really working in the sense of, am I really fostering a relationship with my child that's going to encourage, whether that be like obedience or understanding or like communication? For me personally, I'm like, I tell parents all the time, my goal isn't obedience. Like I really
Right.
want my child to be able to make decisions and to know that I'm on their team. And one of the things I tell my daughter all the time is like, you are never in trouble with me. Like
Mhm.
never. You are never in trouble with me. I'm here to help. And
Yeah.
and I think, when parents see like timeouts or spanking or these other things, they do think, oh, that's working because my child is now doing XYZ. But when we really look at the root of it, I totally agree with you. I don't think that they work at all. And not only do they not work, but I really feel like I'm starting to now see the harm that those kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
those punitive measures really do, not only to our child, but also to my relationship with my kids.
100%.
It can be really, really difficult. So, but I know like timeout, a lot of people are like, okay, yes, we get, spanking is harmful, but they still want to hold on to other punitive things like timeouts and rewards and, taking away
Mm-hmm.
a toy or grounding or these other things that maybe seem less violent or less
Yeah.
harmful. What advice would you give to a parent that says, okay, I know I don't want to do, this type of punishment like spanking or whatever, but they still feel like they see the value in other punitive methods like timeouts and things like that? What would you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really spoke to the heart behind it, which is, what does it mean if a discipline measure works? Like, what's your definition of working?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, if we don't have mile markers or indicators of what we're really going for in the long run, then yeah, anything looks like it's working if it stops a child in the moment.
Mhm.
And so much of what our common sense as a society of discipline is it's what you do in the heat of the moment right after behavior happens. That's when you have all this influence to either increase the behavior or decrease the behavior. And that's scientifically been proven to work in lab rats, but unfortunately humans are a little bit more complex. And so if it were that easy, none of us would be struggling, honestly. Like if we could really just play our cards right and it would all end up with the same outcome, we wouldn't be here talking about it. So
Right.
what's actually happening is that moment right after they hit, or right after, they're having a meltdown, or they're doing something that you don't want them to be doing, then what's actually happening in that moment is that they're emotionally flooded. You're probably emotionally flooded. They're not teachable, and you're not a good teacher.
Mhm.
So whatever you do in that moment is not going to sink in. It's not going to teach a lesson. It's not going to make next time go differently. And I think we'd all agree that's the whole goal, is that next time the same situation occurs, is that it goes better or differently.
Right.
And unfortunately, like the influence just isn't in that moment. It's in all the other moments
Mhm.
that your relationship is building up a sense of connection, where you are teaching them the skills of what to do instead, or how to handle their big emotions, or what problem solving they need to think through to be able to share this toy or take turns. And so much of that is happening on the front end rather than the back end. And so the back end is kind of like the short-sighted route. So when you're thinking about, well, we need to teach them a lesson, we need to show them the consequences of their actions,
Mhm.
there's always a time and a place for a logical or natural consequence of, this is going to help you figure this out, or I need to separate you for some space and safety, and you're always going to know what that looks like as a parent of when that's necessary. But just know that that's not going to be the end all be all that teaches them the lesson for next time. Like it has to be, there's a lot more to it, where you circle back, or you repair that relationship, and then you give them an explanation before it happens again as a heads up, and you're reading a book about it, and you're having a conversation with their sibling, and all these other things are going to be much more influential over time, and
Mhm.
they're going to listen to you if they really feel like you get it.
Yeah.
And so much of the time we're dismissing their reality, their perception, we're not hearing their side of the story, and
Mhm.
ultimately we're deteriorating our relationship by asserting our agenda over their agenda,
Mhm.
where what we really want to be doing is proving to them, I get it, I
Mhm.
hear you, I see it from your side, I'm on your team.
Yeah.
And we can't do that if we're only just relying on the kind of those punitive tools to get the job done.
Mm. I love the fact that you mentioned that it's not just the after the fact part that matters, but all the stuff that we do beforehand that prepares for that one moment. Because
Right.
I think a lot of the punitive stuff kind of comes in, as you mentioned, of that reaction of like, okay, this went wrong, and then now I'm going to do this to punish you for XYZ. Um, but I hadn't really thought about it in the words as you described it, of of really that forward thinking of, I'm preparing you now for that moment before it happens, so that you have the tools that you need to deal with those big emotions, and you have strategies for coping with, uncomfortable situations or dealing with, that stuff before it comes up and before it becomes an issue. And I think if we could focus more on the beforehand, then we wouldn't have to deal with the after part as much, because they're going to
100%.
have those tools in advance.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And one of the other things too that you said that really caught my attention was you mentioned that it was your second daughter that is the strong-willed one. And my daughter Sophia, she is definitely my strong-willed kid. She takes after her mama. After her mama in that sense. And oh gosh, it's so hard. And it's like you see all these qualities in her, and then it's like that is so me, and just very strong character, and no one's gonna tell me what to do, and all those kinds of things. And but your first daughter was not like that. What was your first daughter like?
My first daughter is much more go with the flow. Like her emotions are a little bit more of just even keel. Oh, yeah, I'm happy and then I'm sad, but I'll be just fine. Where my second is like, I'm so excited and I'm so devastated. And then I'm back and I'm excited. I'm so excited. I'm literally shaking. And then I'm going to crash and, nothing can pull me back. So it was just way more volatile, seemed more irrational, in my perception of it. And my husband had a really hard time with it because there was no logic or reasoning or threat or bribe in the moment that would change her mind. Where with my first daughter, you could speak a little bit of logic into like, well, here's the reason why we need to go to school. And I know, that where she's like, okay. And my second daughter's just like, I absolutely not. There's nothing you can say that will make me hurry. Like it's my way or the highway. And that feels very threatening as a parent because it feels like it's, compromising my authority or, there's nothing I can do. And then that creates a sense of helplessness in us where we start to then create some more desperate type tools to react in the moment. And it just is kind of a vicious cycle that's feeding off of this like need for control. We can leverage for these kids in a really positive way because we don't want to crush that spirit out of them. They're so tenacious and it's such a strength, but it's very hard to parent for a while.
Yes, it is challenging for sure. And I think it's so fascinating that your first child was more flexible than your second child, and really being able to kind of see that difference in personality. Because I hear a lot of parents that have strong-willed kids, a lot of them really feel bad, almost like it was like a failure in their own parenting, that their kid has these huge emotional outbursts and is just up and down, like you mentioned. And it really, I think a lot of parents internalize that of like, what did I do that to make my kid be so explosive or so difficult or challenging? And I remember I read a book about a strong-willed child. I'll have to include it in the description. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but I'll look it up and leave it in the description in case anyone wants to check it out. But it was about having a strong-willed child, and I just remember the author writing about the fact that like strong-willed children and being strong-willed, for a lot of times we view that as such a negative character trait, like we say it as in a negative way, but really getting like strong-willed children change the world, like they're just passionate and have purpose, and nothing is going to sway them. And peer pressure is like they're the leaders, and I never really got that perspective before of like being able to view my strong-willed child as, I'm raising this warrior that is powerful and passionate and excited, and and seeing the positives of that character trait rather than just the negatives it's such a huge shift. But I feel like it's so important for parents to know that, even in your case, like you're the same mom, raising these girls, and yet you have one with one personality and the other with a different personality, and both personalities have so much to contribute to the world, in their own way. And it's not, a negative or, anything wrong with you as a mom or a failure as a mom, that, you've got these kids that are like explosive, and I try not to say explosive, I try to say passionate. Rephrasing my language around how I talk about her.
But they're a force to be reckoned with, and I think that they are such a such an advantage for us to parent because they really do call us up into being a better parent, where, you know, other kids are going to let more slide and they're just like, absolutely not. You better get your game face on and figure out more tools, because I'm not going to let you basically call it in. And I think that's where, like, parenting is a huge self-development journey.
Oh yeah.
I've heard it said that like entrepreneurship is a paid self-development journey, so parenting must be the unpaid version.
I love that.
And I think parenting strong-willed kids is like the accelerated elite status, where like you better get it together fast. And yeah, you didn't know that that's what you signed up for. And my kids are 15 months apart, so I was essentially raising them like twins for a while, because they're basically twins, but they could not have been more opposite. And so I knew right off the bat that had nothing to do with me and my parenting. That was 100% the, you know, nature that they were born with. So I just had to figure out how to individualize what I was doing so that it would work with each one of them differently.
What did you find that you had to do differently with a strong-willed child as opposed to a child that was more flexible or compliant?
Yeah, for my oldest, emotions were never a big deal that we had to work with. And that's actually a deficit, because now that she's 9, she's still trying to figure out emotions, because she honestly hasn't put the reps in.
Wow.
You know, like, she hasn't had the do or die moments where she's had to learn some coping strategies, because it's just, life's been pretty even kill. So for her, I'm still trying to teach her to name emotions, or when she's having a really hard time, it might go 0 to 60 really rarely, where, you know, she might be able to do better at her age if she's just had more practice. And for my youngest, she's had all the practice. We've put the reps in over and over and over, day in and day out, because there's been so many meltdowns or so many passionate reactions to life not going her way, that I see it paying off already now that she's 7. And she really has a good grasp on her self-awareness, and she can articulate really well now what she's thinking or feeling. And she still may have a lack of impulse control or some emotional immaturity, but for me, I've had to practice with her a lot more of my regulation, and, you know, change my mindset on how I'm making meaning from her behavior. And I've had to really give her more benefit of the doubt and give her a lot more validation, because for strong-willed kids, they just will not listen to you until they've felt listened to. And where, like, other, you know, my oldest, she'll still be pretty open to hearing me out no matter what. And whereas my youngest, like, I have to unlock her first, and that's like the empathy piece of really trying to say for her what she's trying to say, so that she really feels like, yes, exactly, that's why this is such a big deal to me, that's why I want ice cream for dinner, or that's why, you know, whatever is happening in her head is such a big deal. She has to feel like that is honored before then she's ready to basically make a choice or move on. And so that had been the biggest shift for me, where I realized that that's the game changer. If she feels like I don't get it, we're stuck, and we're going to be stuck for a while, because she feels like I have no choice but to escalate, because clearly you're not getting the message.
I'm hearing you talk, and I feel like you're talking about me and my daughter. But I love your perspective about the fact that she's put in the reps, you know, that she's done this work, and she's really practiced having those big emotions over and over and over. But I totally agree with what you're saying about having that connection, that is so important. For me, that was a really big revelation, that, you know, could I try to, like, control her some sense? I mean, with a strong-willed child, it's like, I feel like that's the part that really confronts you, is like, I cannot, I remember, I will never forget this. My daughter threw these Cheerios on the floor, and I asked her to pick them up, and she just was like, no, and just no. And that was the first time in my life I'm staring at this little kid. I'm like, she's 18 months old, tiny little kid that's just no, one word, no. And it hit me. I'm like, I cannot make you pick these Cheerios off the floor, no matter how much I beg, no matter how much I plead, apart from me like forcing your fingers open and like grabbing the Cheerios for you. I can't do that, you know? And it's hard when you really get the fact that like I cannot control any other human being. The only person that I have control over is myself and my own reactions. And and because I can't control you, like that should not be my goal. And even if I could, you know, I remember thinking like, if I were to like force your hand open and make you grab these chairs from the floor and like pick you up and take you to the trash can and like dump them in there, you know, what do I gain from that? Like, what do I gain, you know? And when we really think about like that long-term goal that you mentioned of like connecting with our child and having that empathy and that connected relationship with them, that is the foundation of being able to work through problems, not from a space of like, I'm trying to control you, but from a space of in partnership together, we're on the same team, we're trying to figure this out together, we've got some issue, you know, a problem, but you're not the problem. We have a problem over here and you're not the problem. How can we work together to figure this out? And it's not going to be by me trying to control you, because that's not going to go over well at all.
Yes, exactly. That's huge to understand.
It is. And it is hard, I think, as parents, you know, especially when we have this authoritarian view that we've been raised with, really shift our focus and to get out of that mentality of like, my authority gives me a right to control you.
Yes, because I'm the parent, you're the child.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, how do you help parents like work through that mentality? And I guess do you still view yourself as an authority in the life of your child, or how do you view authority as a gentle parent?
Great question. Yeah, I think so much of the family unit should be on the same hierarchy, as in we treat each other with mutual respect. We hold each other to high standards. We agree together on kind of a code of ethics that everyone should be held to, not just the kids. And I help parents kind of like write out some family goals, or they have like a family agreement that everybody in the family signs, even if they can barely sign their name. But the point of it is to really make it obvious to the kids that it's not a do as I say, not as I do, or a really like hypocritical form of leadership. But instead, it's like, I'm expecting this out of you. And in order for me to expect this out of you, I need to expect it out of myself first. And I'm going to have to show you what that looks like by modeling it. And I'm going to have a level of honesty and vulnerability in my leadership that you can call me out on it and hold me accountable to it, because we all signed it and it's on the fridge, you know, like, and that does not make you smaller in your child's eyes. That actually gives them a really magnetic sense of, I want to follow this person, because that's how us humans, you know, are wanting to follow other mentors and like bosses in, you know, the work world. Like when we see someone who is in charge of us really get to know us on an individual level and empower us with more voice and choices in our role and lead by example, then we absolutely want to do well for that person and care what they think of us. That's the same thing that we're trying to bring home. And, you know, we all have worked for a bad boss where, you know, they're micromanaging and they barely know that we're a person outside of work, and they're just kind of asking for the world without giving a whole lot in return. And ultimately, we don't want to stay late for that person without pay, because why? Right? Like it's always going to be what's in it for me. And so when we look at our leadership in our home with that lens in mind of just kind of like the best practices we know in the leadership realm, then it's easier to be able to see how we're not just going to be our child's best friend. We're not going to be permissive, just letting them run the show and do whatever they want to do. Instead, we are really just trying to show them that, like you said, they're not the problem. The problem's over here. There's always going to be these limiting factors or, you know, codes of ethics that we're going to have to intervene with because we have their back and we want what's best for them. But we're also going to be there to help them problem solve through it, or find a new solution, or learn the skill that they need for that situation, because how else are they going to learn how to be a grown-up? So like that's where that authority kind of comes in, where it helps them see what the problem even is and what the options even are and how to follow through on that and how I can show you how I'm, doing this in my own life. And that's going to be something that pays off for years to come.
I love that. How do you like, shifting that focus, as you mentioned, from being the authority, and then on the flip side, we've got that permissive parenting that you mentioned of like, we just kind of let the kids do whatever. I think a lot of people have that view of gentle parenting, that it does
Yes.
tend to be more permissive in the sense of like, it's just kind of this heyday and we just like, let kids do whatever, and
Yep.
like boundaries or structure anything. Like
Yep.
how do you find that balance,
Yes.
and really embody the heart of gentle parenting, which isn't authoritarian, but it is also not the flip side of this just free for all chaos, everyone does whatever.
Yes, yes. Because so often we feel like we're just swinging on a pendulum
Right.
from, I'm too nice, and then all of a sudden I'm too strict because I snap. And that's so common because this hasn't been modeled for us. If it wasn't done for you, you don't know what this looks like. And it almost feels like, walking a tightrope where you're just falling off either side constantly.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of parents that are trying to do gentle parenting. And so they're trying to be, super, super, super nice and calm, cool, collected, and ask, like a broken record 25 times. And then all of a sudden they snap and they're threatening to throw all the toys away.
Yep.
And we need to find the happy medium there. And it really does mean that you have to start off firmer. And so through positive discipline, I teach a framework of always trying to be kind and firm at the same time. And so there's a specific way to do that even within the same sentence, where you're trying to validate and say, I get it. I can see that you're having a hard time. This is a big deal to you. You really want to eat ice cream. And you're always pairing it with an and here's the problem. Here's the limit. Here's what I can't let you do. Here's what I need you to do. And you're pairing those two things together. And that allows you to, basically unlock that conversation so that your child is easier to get through to because they're ready to listen about what the options are next, while you're still holding them to the boundary or whatever needs to happen without letting them run the show and do whatever they want. And you still want to basically say, here's the problem, or I can't let you hurt your sibling, whatever you need to intervene about, and then give an immediate follow-up choice. And that choice is not an ultimatum. It is, here are two really equally good options of how you can follow through that are going to be a win-win for both of us. And, they're pre-approved options that are still going to get you to the place that you need them to get to, but you're giving them engagement in being able to have some level of control and voice in how it happens. Because for the most part, there's a million directions we have to give them all day, but we do not have to specify exactly how, exactly when, exactly the order, exactly, down to the detail of what it looks like. There's still, we're putting up the guardrails, but there's still a lot of flexibility in between what we need them to do. And the more that we give them control over that in between, the more they're actually learning critical thinking skills and responsibility and the problem solving they need to be able to do it without us telling them all the reminders, because we got to work ourselves out of a job. So it's got to look like we're giving them a little bit, every time. And as they get older, we wean them off of that by scaffolding it too.
It's really hard to trust our kids to make wise choices when we don't give them the opportunity to
totally
choices, it's like one of those mind-blowing things. Like, if I don't give you a chance to practice making a choice, like, I know for myself, like, making choices is something that I always struggle with, of just being unsure of myself and not, knowing which one is going to be the best option, or even giving myself options sometimes, or feeling like you just have to do something. But really, I think when we can give our children that opportunity to authentically choose, it makes such a difference in their personality. And you mentioned using the word and I think that's definitely something that I would love to highlight. I attended a course and they talked about the disappearance of problems. And one of the ways that we can disappear a problem is through using the word and. And when, they were talking about it in the context of leadership, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant when it comes to parenting too.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times we have this thing, we use but all the time, right? Like, I know that you want to keep playing, but we have to leave, right?
Yeah.
And when we use that word, but it creates that feel of like, like there's this conflict and there's this struggle there. But if we just shift our language and say, I know that you really want to keep playing, and now it's time for us to go, and we're gonna, go to dinner in 5 minutes or something like that. Literally just eliminating the but and switching it, replacing it with the word and, it makes such a difference in the way that I, relate to my kids, and even in the way that they communicate, and really getting that I value your experience. I'm hearing you, and we also have XYZ,
Yes, both things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think it really gives kids that space to feel validated and know that, we have this other thing that's going on too, and that both are okay. And we're gonna move.
I think one of the things that was really helpful to me as a parent was understanding that when kids begin to feel entitled, they are treated in a way that it feels like their needs are the most important. And so often just by default we can kind of make that feel true, because that's how they start out, is like, as infants. I mean, kind of rules everything. But as they get older, we have to help them understand that not only are their needs important, and the needs of the family and their sibling and me as your parent, or the school, or the swim teacher, or whatever else, like those needs are also important. And those things can be competing, but they can also coexist in a way where it's just a problem to solve. And there are so many ways that we can brainstorm a way to find a win-win that might be something that is a little bit unconventional, that you wouldn't have actually thought of as the parent, but they think of, and it's brilliant then. And then they're absolutely gonna follow through on it and cooperate because it was their idea. And so I think just, looking at that from a different lens can really open up a lot of flexibility for us.
That is so true. I love that idea that, a lot of times when we propose whatever the problem is to our kids, I really think that it makes a difference for them, like you said, to feel like they have buy-in, or they're taking part in figuring out the solution. But a lot of times it is very true. Like if I bring a problem to my daughter, like, hey, we're having this problem with, leaving the house on time, or whatever that might be. How do you think that we could fix this? Or can we brainstorm together ways that we could deal with this? Because this is the impact of us, not getting out on time, or whatever that might look like. And then literally, like, sometimes the things that she comes up, my daughter's just turned 8. But the things that she comes up with, I'm like, that is brilliant. Like, I literally did not even think about that. And you're 8 years old. And I'm like, that's a great idea.
Yes. And how empowering is that conversation? And how much is that setting her up for success in college down the road? Because she knows, how to think through this if she's still having a similar problem. And how much better is that as an alternative to yelling for the last 5 minutes of every morning routine for the next few years?
Yeah. Yes, that is so true. Oh my gosh. And yelling, I think, is one of the things. I'm Italian, so yelling is one of the things that has been really hard, really, really hard. That, like, we have this commitment not to yell in our house. And yet, sometimes I find myself yelling, even though I know that I have this commitment not to yell. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love the title of your podcast, Failing Motherhood, because every time that I act in a way that I know is not gentle, whether that be yelling or, whatever, being impatient with her or with myself, it feels like I'm failing. I feel that sense of like, oh, I'm failing as a mom. I'm failing as being a gentle parent. How do you handle that? Because obviously as gentle parents, we're not perfect. And yes, we have those code of ethics, as you mentioned, that are on our fridge of like, this is how we're going to treat each other. But we don't always do that.
Right.
What do you do when you find yourself in that situation, that you have this mutual commitment and this agreement to treat people with respect and with kindness and gentleness, and then stuff happens and you fail at motherhood in that moment.
Yes, yes. And it's such a prevailing common feeling that I want to normalize that and have that conversation, because so many parents struggle alone, feeling like they're the only ones that beat themselves up every night. And you're absolutely not alone. Join the club. But one of the things that I help my clients understand is when they create this code of ethics, or their family's core values, I really make it a point for them to point out their strength and their weakness on that list, and let them know that it's so important that they teach from both of those places, because they're going to naturally create environments and conversations where they can lead by example for the things that come naturally to them. But just as importantly, they can live out loud their own growth in a certain area and just be really truthful about, hey, this is something that I'm not good at and I'm trying to work on, and this is what it looks like, and I want you to help me with this, and when I screw up, I'm going to apologize, and we're going to try again. And that really models for your kids like that authenticity in the relationship, and how much they can trust you, and what it looks like to have that level of vulnerability with them. And that is going, like, one of the core tenets of positive discipline is that mistakes are opportunities to learn. And I think the only way that we really show our kids that is by modeling that, and how we have compassion for ourselves that says, I'm trying really hard and I'm still, going to make a mistake. And when I do, I'm going to, work to correct the situation and solve the problem and try again the next day. But mistakes are opportunities to learn. So I need to go back and say, why was that so hard for me? Why did I have such a hard time? What is going on for me that I'm so irritable and angry right now? And maybe it's just, I need to go to bed earlier, and, that I do that. But like, there's always going to be reasoning behind it. And it's not just that we're bad people, and it's not that we're raising bad kids. It's just, there's problems to solve, and it's okay.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's ever a time that you feel like positive parenting or positive discipline would not work.
I would be hard pressed because there are definitely kids that don't need the level of skills that I teach to parents, where basically they can get away with less. Where you can say things in the most direct way, and it's not going to offend their child, and they don't need as much practice with emotions, and there's just going to be a lot less problems to respond to. And then there's the kids that do need the full arsenal. And so for strong-willed kids, like, they really do need more, but it'll still work for other kids. But with other kids, they don't need maybe as much. But when there's always every kid is different. There's always a level of neurodiversity that you take into account, and whether there's extra needs or sensitivities or sensory issues. I think the more that you're a student of your child, the more that you understand what tools in your toolkit are going to work based on the circumstance that you find yourself in. And like, the more tools you have, the more equipped you feel. And so I really don't think that there's ever a situation where they need I'll say, as my daughters have gotten a lot older, and there are circumstances where I absolutely know that they know better, and it's just a mindfulness issue where it's like, hey, you really just need to wash your hands after you go potty. We've been practicing this for years. At that point, like, I can set up a little a structured system where it's like, hey, when you don't wash your hands after you go to the bathroom, then we'll have this, set aside consequence that we both agree on. Or I created a system where I was like, hey, you're leaving books in the bathroom all the time. Every time that there's a book left in the bathroom, I'm going to put it up. Where that's not like, you don't start there. But at some point, like, you can get to a place where you're just holding them to that higher standard because they can. And then it's been a non-issue since. You know what I mean? So like, you can always like step back and then feel like you know what your kids need. But I think even with our whole prison system, I mean, it's just been shown that like punishment is just, it's not helping. It's not getting to the root of the issue. It's not actually helping tomorrow and next time go differently. So the more that we can really just like decode our kids' behavior, see what they're really needing and meet them there, and then just be a really good example of healthy boundaries and clear communication, can't really go wrong.
I agree. Once I really started kind of peeling back those layers of gentle parenting and really, like you talked about, getting to the root of why we're doing this, and that we're not looking for the short-term success or that it's for something to quote unquote work short-term, but we're looking at that long-term piece of wanting to cultivate, relationship with our child and have a human being that's going to do what's right because it's the right thing, or they're going to be compassionate with others and empathetic. And it really struck me of like, I wonder what this world would be like, if every system that we have could really operate without punishment, without threats and manipulation and trying to control everyone around us. And you mentioned the system, and actually I wrote a book about my experience with the school system that was like that, and just seeing all these different areas of life that are so impacted with punishments and control. And actually that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because I really started imagining what would the world look like, what would life be like if it wasn't just our children that were parented in this way, but all of society was able to experience being able to be free to make a choice and to treat others with empathy and compassion and stuff like that. And beautiful. And I'm so thankful for the work that you do and in providing that, and those strategies that you mentioned, because it's a lot of times I feel like parents know what we don't want to do. Like, okay, I know I don't want to spank. I know that I don't want to yell, but they don't have the strategies of what to do now. Like I know what I don't want, but what can I do instead? Because like you said, all we have experience for the most part is rewards and punishment, and it is challenging. And so I'm so thankful for the work that you do to do one-on-one coaching and all these resources that you've provided. And actually I wanted to share with my audience, Danielle has been so kind and gracious to share with us a couple different freebies that are going to be available in the description. And I wanted to ask you if you could just take a couple of minutes and share about the services that you provide, and then the different resources that are available for my audience to be able to enjoy and learn from and add to their arsenal of different things that they can use and incorporate as we are trying our best to fail forward.
Exactly. Yes. I love that. Definitely, like wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can go search Failing Motherhood and connect with me there. So, you can do that while you're listening. My podcast is all the places as well. It's every other Tuesday, and it's interviews with, experts that resonate with that feeling of, I feel like I'm failing, or I have felt that way. And here's how I resonate with that. And here's what, insight I gained on my journey, and just really honest, deep reflections. And so if that is something that you resonate with, then definitely join the club over at Failing Motherhood. And another great way to connect with me is on Instagram. I am at parent_wholeheartedly. And you can say hi and say that you've found me from this podcast episode. That's always really fun. But I work with families one-on-one and through a group. There's kind of two ways to work with me. And the one-on-one is called Sanity and Solutions, where it is a very individualized plan with 3 big goals. It's improving your patience by working through a triggers guide, getting on the same page by writing a family business plan, and improving your child's behavior by learning more positive discipline strategies and cultivating a lot more cooperation collaboratively. So if those big focuses you have goals in and you want to work through that with your parenting partner, then that's how we work together one-on-one. And that's, through Zoom, through Voxer, through, an online course to kind of back you up, and as well as a big workbook that I mail directly to you. And so we just meet every other week and keep kind of creating and implementing more ways that you can bring these things into your home and tweak and troubleshoot all of the pain points that are narrowed into your kids in your home and your exact circumstances. So that's Sanity and Solutions. And then I have a group program called Wholeheartedly Calm. And that is 11 weeks of live Q&A calls back to back every single week. And then the content is spaced out where it's a little bit more of a class format. So you're building a foundation and each week builds on the last, where it's a lot of just like really short audio trainings that you play like podcast episodes, and then you jump in the live call and, you know, ask your questions and really just make it all make sense. And so that's a really huge advantage to that, is the camaraderie of having that true validation yourself, of knowing my house isn't the only one that has a kid that goes 0 to 1,000 with, you know, this reaction about getting the red cup versus the blue cup. Okay, that is really, really reassuring to hear. And, you know, getting to hear what other ideas and strategies are working in other people's homes as well. And so really loving that. And you can jump into either of those programs at any time. So you can connect with me through the links in my bio on Instagram or my website, parentingwholeheartedly.com.
Awesome. And then Danielle's also been so generous to share with us her Calm Your Big Emotions workbook for free. And I'm super excited to check that one out and to make that available for all of you. So that is a free workbook about calming your big emotions, because God knows I need to calm my own emotions. I feel like more so than my child. It is a lot of work, as you mentioned, that parenting is so much about like self-transformation and really dealing with my own triggers and my own stuff. Because I think a lot of times if I can just deal with my own stuff, it makes it so much easier to deal with everyone else's stuff. Calming Your Big Emotions workbook, that is available for free. So make sure that you check out the link and you download that, and you connect with Danielle, and I'll make sure that I include the link to her website as well as your Instagram, so that you can get connected and follow her and be a part of the amazing work that she's doing to help spread love and connection with your children. And Danielle, I just want to thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast today. It was so great to talk with you and to hear about your experience having a strong-willed child, just like me. And I'm sure so many of my audience can relate to that fact of how challenging it is to have a strong-willed child. And at the same time, what a beautiful process it is to see our strong-willed children growing and just becoming this powerful force of nature, as you mentioned, in the world. And yes, I'm excited to see how things turn out for you and your two daughters. So thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And I always like to close with one final question. If you could give one piece of advice to a family that is considering positive discipline or considering practicing gentle parenting, what would that one piece of advice be?
So much. I think my piece of advice would be considering why not, like the generational change that can happen, where you look back years into the future and think like the ripple effects of making a commitment now to changing things and setting a different trajectory for your family's future. You'll never regret it. You'll just never regret it. You're never gonna say down the road, well, at least we still have this money in the bank. Like, even though our kids are a mess and our mental health is deteriorated and our marriage, divorced, at least I still have that money. You really will never regret making a commitment and investing in your family to, equip yourself with more tools, because of just how much that means for your sanity and for your confidence in knowing that you're the parent you want to be. And, you're setting such a great example for your kids to want to come home for Christmas later on and really trust you and come to you and open up to you with, a lot of the big things to come down the road. And that you can't just turn that on. You have to really set up that credibility in that relationship now. So really just consider what that could do for you. And it really won't happen unless you carve out the time and make it urgent and have accountability in that realm. Because I know you have books on your nightstand, but it's not going to really transform your relationship with your child in the way that you want it to unless you bring it up to a top priority.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key benefit of coaching and having that that community around you, that we can know that we're not alone in this parenting journey, and we all have different things that we're struggling with, and we all fail at motherhood
Mm-hmm.
in some way or another, or fatherhood in some
Mm-hmm.
way or another. And but we're not alone in this. And
No.
truly, I think having community and being able to learn from one another, and even just getting like strategies and stuff from other moms, is so huge, at least in my own parenting journey, of just learning other strategies that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. And
Mm-hmm.
being able to learn and grow together is huge. So thank you so much for providing an
Yes.
opportunity for parents to do that. And to
Of
those of you that
course.
are listening, I want to thank you so much for staying tuned for this episode of the Peaceful World Schooling Podcast. Please make sure that you also check out Danielle's podcast, the Failing Motherhood Podcast, which will be linked below. I want to thank you for investing your time here with us today, and I hope that your day is as wonderful as you are. And we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye. Join us next Tuesday on the Peaceful Worldschooling Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Harders, and if you enjoyed today's episode, click subscribe and be sure to hit the bell so you will not miss out on a single episode.